sinners, and saints. Dust off those horns and halos. It's time for Alan After Dark.
Can you believe it, sinners and saints? This is the 100th episode of Alan After Dark. I'm amazed myself. I just cannot believe that we've made it this far, this long. A lot of podcasts don't even make it to the 20th episode, much less the 100th episode. I am really proud of this accomplishment, and I am very, very thankful to all of you that listen every week. It really is amazing how the spoken word can travel around the world. I'm always just blown away when I see my statistics for the week and see that some of you are listening from the Ukraine, from Russia, from England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, France, Spain, Morocco, South Africa, Cambodia, all 50 states in the United States, Canada, Mexico, Singapore, China, Australia. It absolutely blows my mind that you all give me one of your most valuable assets, time, just to listen to my blethering stupidity in most cases. I can never say thank you enough for that. And I hope to continue to entertain and challenge you for many years to come.
Oh my God. This is great.
But we'll see. Who knows what's going to happen in this world? When I started Alan After Dark, the primary purpose was a version of therapy for me. I really wanted to share with the world the experiences a gay man has living in the Bible Belt of the American South. And that continues to be my purpose, even though I want us to talk about anything and everything under the sun. So I started thinking about how should we celebrate the 100th episode? And I don't really want to do one of those kind of reminiscing type flashback episodes, but I really do want to talk about some of the most important issues that I've discussed over the previous 99 shows. You know how this show goes, though, right? I mean, I'll talk about one thing which will lead to a totally different topic popping in the middle somewhere. But in keeping with a celebratory mood, let's take a trip back in time through previous Alan After Dark episodes to talk about what I think are some of the most important highlights. No Alan After Dark story would be complete if I didn't talk about Grady Thomas. Let me remind you, before we get started, the names of people are changed to protect the guilty, the innocent, and the satisfied. In this case, I don't think innocent necessarily fits, but you can decide after I finish the story. So when I was 13 years old, I was, of course, a freshman in high school, and I rode the bus to school. And it was a weird thing where there were 5 buses that would go to the elementary school, but there was only one bus that would pick up all the kids from the other buses that went to high school. And we only had the one bus that went on to the high school, if that makes any sense. And that bus was always crowded. And a lot of times some kids had to stand up in the aisle. I know that would be frowned on now, but it happened. So this one day, I was sitting on the aisle in the seat, and Grady Thomas was standing right there beside me, kind of balancing himself against the seat. And did I describe him before? He was a year older than me, or 2 years older than me, perhaps, if I try to think right. But he had a little bit longer hair, and he actually had facial hair. It was a sort of sandy blonde, and he was a built boy. He was nicely built. He was impressive because I guess I was still trying to work my way through puberty, and he was already through it, and his body was developing very, very nicely. He was athletic, at least in elementary school. I don't remember him being athletic, playing any sports in high school, but, I wasn't keeping that close of tabs on him. So anyway, I'm sitting there and I can't help but look at his crotch, his dick area, because he was standing right there and he was wearing these jeans that seemed to accentuate that area even better. The bus took a hard curve and our driver was a little bit fast with his driving. Grady sort of accidentally jolted forward and his crotch area hit my shoulder. And I was really getting turned on. I mean, I was just like, oh my God. And all he had to do would be take one step back or push himself away to not be touching me anymore with his dick. But he didn't. It kept it up against my shoulder. Maybe he wasn't paying attention. Maybe he thought his dick was up against the back of the seat. But anyway, there it was. And it hit me. The word that I had been searching to define myself came to me. And I just said in my mind, Alan, you're gay. When I said those words in my mind, that revelation, that epiphany, I felt more free than I had felt ever, I think. I've told you all that I knew that I was different from as early as I can remember, perhaps as early as 5. I just didn't know what word to put with it. Maybe puberty is a factor in our awakening. I mean, I don't know that, but maybe it is. Maybe that was what was happening to me when I had that realization. I had heard references of being gay in like the 6th and 7th grade. And I mentioned that on a previous episode where our English teacher, Miss Griffin, she was reading off these sentences that we needed to write. And the sentence was something like this. It was like, all the children enjoyed celebrating the holiday at the gay parade. 2 of my classmates started giggling, and she was like, stop that. That is not a reference to that filthy behavior some people have. So even teachers at the younger years, when it might have come up, they were reinforcing all those negatives. They were saying that being gay was a bad thing. But I never really at that point equated the gay thing with me. It wasn't until that morning on that school bus with Grady Thomas's dick pressed against my shoulder that it really made me aware that the word I was looking for at that time was gay. Obviously, living in the Bible Belt, not only do you have religious people bashing you, but you have bigots, you have the racist, the hillbillies that believe in the Ku Klux Klan and white power and all that. They hate gay people too. So you're getting it from all sides. So imagine being a 13-year-old boy, realizing you're gay and not knowing what to do with that, not knowing how I should handle it other than I needed to stay in the closet. And if you remember, I had a best friend who was a girl who had a crush on me, but I didn't have the same feelings for her. She was the funniest person I've ever met in my life. And I told her that I was gay. And I was lucky. She didn't tell anybody. She kept that to herself. And it was somebody that I could talk with about my feelings and not worry about judgment. I think I told you when I told her, she just kind of said, well, at least I know no other girl's going to get you, because she realized there's no point in trying to compete because you can't compete if the guy you're after only likes guys. So that was my first big turning point in my life. And I will always owe Grady a special debt of gratitude for his dick rub against my shoulder. That story turns me on to this day. That was one hell of an experience. And yes, I was aroused, we'll say. Thank goodness for books, right? You put them in front of you or you just untucked your shirt, those good things. But high school, for all of its negativity, there were a lot of things that helped to awaken the fires of lust in me as a gay boy. I mean, honestly, we're just a ball of hormones, right? Erections raging, just horny all the time, just trying to comprehend why your body is all of a sudden so electric and doing things that you aren't really familiar with at first. You don't really have sex talks. My parents didn't talk to me about sex. I had to learn it the hard way. And actually, I'm still learning. Jesus. The next major turning point or experience was sexual attraction. And that came in the form of male teachers in high school who couldn't seem to keep their hands off their dicks. Mr. Adcox, my science and biology teacher, he was also the baseball coach, and he eventually became vice principal. In science and biology, his classroom was basically a laboratory, which we never used the lab tables. We were all sitting in desks, but his desk was a lab table as well that was kind of like, at an elevation where you could stand up and work, but he would sit on it in front of us. And I guess he was always uncomfortable. My guess is he wore the wrong kind of underwear, but he would jump up on the desk, he would man spread, and he would rework his dick with this weird like pinch pull constantly, every time. And I loved it. I was so drawn to watching him do that every damn day in class that I just really wanted to see what was in there. I really did. It just was one of the things that turned me on, was watching guys adjust themselves. And quite frankly, it still turns me on today. He is really lucky that he was a teacher back then, because I'm pretty sure that the girls could argue that that was a form of sexual harassment of some kind. I mean, he's up there adjusting his dick. I don't know what the rules are about that kind of thing, but I'm pretty sure now students could complain about that, because it does come off as a sexual behavior. I mean, you are touching your sex organ, right? I don't know. He used to come in the boys' room to pee, and I'd always wanted to look over and see what he had packing between his legs. The best thing to do apparently would have been to join the team and shower in the locker room, where apparently all the coaches showered with the players. And so you would have gotten to see his dick. I think I told you all that one of the football coaches back then, he showered with them, and they all talked about how big his dick was. But maybe that's why he did it. He wanted to brag about the size of his cock. Well, I don't know. I'm getting myself tongue-tied here. God damn, this is a fucked up episode. Go figure, right? For the 100th, I'm going to have to do some major editing on this damn thing. I'm telling you. There were also a couple of students, one in particular, Mark Mason, that I'm pretty sure I brought up before, who also played with himself all the time. And he was the one that in class, he was on the basketball team and the baseball team, but he came straight from practice to this class, and he was just wearing his basketball clothes. He had a tank top and he had his shorts that were in the school colors. And I was always certain that he tended to wear a jock. For daily wear, he was wearing a jock. So anyway, the way the room was set up, our seats were like in a rows and aisles, but they were in a shape of a U. I was on the first seat on one side, and I could look across and see other students looking toward me. And so he, Mark Mason, sat on the third seat, which was against the wall. Each row had just like 3 seats. It was really weird. And he sat on that last seat, and I could see straight to him in between his legs. And that day when he came in, he sat back there. He's the kind of guy who puts the one foot on the side of the other foot, but he was totally man-spreading. And he noticed that I was looking, and he just lifted up his shorts so I could see right into the leg of it and see his jock. But he kept his hands on his dick all the damn time. I mean, all the damn time. And also, I have a cousin. We'll call him Mike. He, no matter where it was, his hands were on his dick. If it was in class, if it was in PE, if it was in church, if it was in a potluck dinner or something, no matter what the situation, his hands were on his dick. I just assumed he was just uncomfortable, or maybe it was the size of your wiener. I think if you have a certain size, like if you're a smaller size, it kind of moves around a lot if you don't have the right size of underwear. So you're always fixing it to feel comfortable or something like that. But those years, I don't want to say they defined me, because they didn't, but they taught me a lot of lessons on what you should and shouldn't do. Not even that, what you can and can't do in an area like I lived in this part of the country. You had to protect yourself. And that's what I did. And I call that surviving. People seem nostalgic when they talk about the 80s, and they feel like it was like the greatest time of people's lives. They romanticize what they've seen in movies and the music, but I'm here to tell you that the 80s weren't so great, weren't so glamorous. It was really tough for a young gay kid to just function on a day-to-day basis, getting through school, when you would hear your teachers say terrible things about gay people, not realizing they had gay students sitting there. It just helped you to understand that you had to protect yourself so much. And I wonder why people think that the 80s were so good. Is it solely because of what they've seen in pop culture? I just remember how poor my family was, how my dad was unemployed for a long stretch of time, and we had no money coming in, and things were desperate. And I had to work a terrible job where people were just mean. And I really do feel like the 80s are worth forgetting in a lot of ways. But those who ignore their history are doomed to repeat it. So I don't want to be a person who forgets the lessons that I learned. Another funny thing about living in the South, in the Bible Belt, it's how there's certain people who will try to convolute the situation. I don't know if I've ever told you all this, but I remember once this guy who said he was straight, and his argument was that the guy that he was having sex with, they were both straight, so it didn't really count as gay sex. I mean, my answer was, you really haven't grasped this gay concept, have you? But sometimes it was things like that that actually protected him, I'm sure. It was a way for him to cope, at least temporarily, and hopefully allow him time to come to terms with who he is. I hope it just didn't span decades of absolute denial where he wound up marrying a woman even though he was gay, but just making the argument that whenever he had sexual encounters with men, it was okay because both of them were straight. That sounds like something a televangelist would say, doesn't it? We have talked a lot on Alan After Dark about religion and my views of it. I'm not shy about expressing my dislike for religion and the hypocrisy around it. Being a boy that was raised in the Bible Belt, of course, I had to go to church. I am the son of a Baptist deacon. My mother used to play piano in the church, and I was there, my brother and I, every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesdays, and every second Saturday of the month, we had a church singing with visiting singers from other places. Sometimes gospel groups, solo artists would come and sing. Yeah, but it was during those years when I understood that it was more about a social gathering than it was about spirituality. There's so little to do in a lot of these country areas, these rural areas, that churches become popular just because you have the opportunity to mingle with people, to talk, to socialize. And you got a really good taste of how hypocritical people were. You were judged harshly every time you were there. Ministers, pastors, preachers would bash gay people almost every chance they got. And you just realized that it didn't carry, well, for me, it did not carry any value emotionally or any other way, really. I would go because there were two guys, the preacher's sons, that were hot. And I get to look at them for a little while and have to tolerate a lot of the bullshit I would hear. But that wasn't easy either because the boys I thought were cute were boys I went to school with, and I know that there were rumors about me and all that, and that carried from school to churches. You know it did. One of the primary functions of most small towns is to spread gossip, whether it's a 16-year-old boy or a 47-year-old man or whatever, a woman who's a slut, a trollop, whatever. All those things, they just run like water through a small town. And a church can be the central distributor of gossip. And I do recall on one of the first episodes of Alan After Dark, I talked about how the church was way before any of us existed. We happened to have, for some reason, the church books, which included minutes of all the business meetings. And back in like the 40s and 50s, the church considered itself, especially the Baptist church my grandparents were a member of, they considered themselves basically the law of the area. You were to ignore the police, and if you had a problem, you came to the church and talked to the preacher, the minister, the pastor, and the deacons, and it was supposed to be resolved that way. I had read in some of the minutes where they removed a member of the church because she had called the police because of her abusive brother. And the church said, you can't be a member here because you broke the rules. You were supposed to come to us to resolve this issue. I'm sure she was much happier leaving the church, but my grandmother had once said that her best friend, they would actually almost like hold court in the church. She was confronted about some issue that I can't remember what it was, but my grandmother said that when she was up there testifying, answering the questions, she crossed her fingers because she intended to lie. She felt like it was none of their business, but she didn't know what else to do but go along with it. To me, that is on the brink of being called a cult, don't you think? Another scary reason to avoid religion. Cults do evolve out of religion. Tell me I'm wrong. My favorite part of Alan After Dark is telling you all some of the funniest things that have happened to me in my life. And I remember telling you guys the story of the Kmart incident. I think I told you when my mother worked, she worked in a factory for many years. But on Saturdays, she always dragged me and my brother, and sometimes her sisters and their kids, we all went to town on Saturdays. This one particular Saturday, we were at Kmart, and in the spring and summer, they would have like a lot of farming supplies. Like they would have trees that you could buy and plant at home. And those would usually be displayed outside on like the front, like the porch or the awning under cover. Whatever reason that day, we were walking in and my brother had said something that distracted me. I turned to look back at him and turned back, and one of the limbs on the trees went right up my nose. I pulled it out and pulled away and didn't think anything about it. I was just embarrassed that a tree limb went up my nose. And we go walking in to the store, and I noticed people were looking at me. Well, I just kind of, I don't know, put my hand to my nose and looked down and realized that my nose was bleeding. What did I do? I didn't go running to the men's room. I went to the nearest clothing rack and wiped my nose on a shirt. Oh my God, I was so stupid. But I was like 12, I think. Anyway, I'm lucky I didn't get in trouble, and there weren't as many security cameras back then, so they probably didn't see me do it. And somebody might have pulled that shirt out and went, oh wow, fancy design, or realized that it was blood, and they may have my DNA. They may be trying to find me. They'll do one of those reverse tests. They'll go on 23andMe or Ancestry and cross-match it. I mean, it's only been like 30-something years ago when that happened, so Jesus. Oh, my absolute favorite episodes have been the Halloween ones. I've had lots of creepy and scary things happen to me, and I've really enjoyed sharing those stories with you and getting your feedback. I know some of it may seem totally outlandish and even made up, perhaps. You think that, but I'm telling you the truth. All those stories are based on experiences I've had. Now, I will be the first to admit that maybe my memory isn't perfect, and I will get a few things wrong here or there. Like I remember a recent episode when we were talking about, actually, I think it was last week, actually. Actually, it was 2 weeks ago, I think. And I was talking about Good Friday and how my grandparents always planted their garden starting on that day. Well, I said grandparents. You all know that I only knew one grandmother. When I said that, I really meant that I knew the story of their tradition. So when I was around, it was just my grandmother, and it was the uncles and her next husband who planted gardens then. I didn't count her new husband as a grandfather. He was a skanky ass son of a bitch that I despised. But anyway, just a little thing like that. I mean, the story is accurate. I just kind of said grandparents because I was basing it on the history, not my personal experience with my grandmother. So please forgive me for that. If you want, you can spank me later. I don't mind. But that also kind of brings to mind all the superstitions that exist in the South, all the weird things that people believe, and just bizarre moments that we've all had. You know, I've told you all about, we called them the Church of God, but I think they were all like Pentecostal, the ones that speak in tongues and do snake handling. And I'm pretty sure I told you all the story. My mother and her sister and my grandparents, they had a quartet, and they would go to different churches and sing. They also sang at their home church. Well, they were invited to this Church of God to sing, and when they were there, the whole congregation in the church, they were singing, and two of the deacons brought out these two baskets with lids on top. And my mom, she leaned over to her father and said, "What's that?" And she said it's the only time she ever heard her father swear. And he looked at them all. He says, "Come on, we're getting the hell out of here." They get to the car and they're leaving. And my mom pressed and he said, "Those were filled with rattlesnakes and water moccasins. They're snake handlers. We would have never come here if I'd known that." While snake handling is illegal, there are still churches to this day in the area of Tennessee and Kentucky that still perform snake handling and the speaking in tongues. Oh, Lord, that time one of my elementary school classmates, he was with a group and they came visiting from their church to sing. I'm telling you, I knew then he was gay as a picnic basket. He gets up there, he starts speaking in tongues. Well, we don't believe in that stuff. And so there was a conflict from one side to the other with them doing that. It was just embarrassing, though, because I know the person. All that stuff was fake. That is not real. It's bullshit. It was just for show, thinking he could impress someone, which he absolutely didn't. But I'll never get over seeing him up there acting that way, knowing that he's a pole smoker. And I wonder now, is he still living in the area down there, or move away and finally accept himself and just do away with all that bullshit that he was being fed or he was feeding to others? I just don't know how he thought that anybody would be impressed with that. It just was the most ridiculous display I have ever seen in my life. Up there with that microphone and just maybe it traumatized me. I remember that too well. I do, and I shouldn't. But I would always laugh at these groups. They would have microphones and everything. Our church was so little, you didn't need a microphone to sing, for God's sake, but they wanted to look like the superstars. Oh, Lord. Everything is about impressing somebody else, isn't it?
What in the hell is this, bitch?
For some reason, I just flash back to my early childhood. You know, one of the things that I think I'm impressed with as far as myself, which I know sounds so egotistical and arrogant, I can flash back to when I was just 6 years old. I had two other cousins from my mom's two brothers. They had it a little bit better than I did. You know, their parents would drive them to school. They wound up going to a private school, and that kind of left me on my own. And I can remember that first day, little bitty 6-year-old me at the bus stop, getting on that school bus by myself, scared to death, not knowing what I was doing other than I was going to school. Didn't know where to go, no idea of what really was going to happen. And I'm proud of that little boy. I'm proud that he was able to do what he did, getting on that bus, facing that fear, getting to school, becoming a strong, independent person who developed friendships on his own terms. And it's kind of obvious, I guess, that I didn't have very close friends, especially in elementary school. We all got along. We were all friends in school, but it was more like acquaintances out of necessity. We were all in the same class, and that's just going to happen, right? It's like people you work with that we talked about once before, that it just seems like people develop friendships because you're around them so much that you spend upwards of 8 hours a day, 5 days a week with them. The same can be said about school, that you're spending upwards of 6 to 7 hours a day with people every day for 5 days a week. And either you become friends or get along, or you just don't even speak to each other. And I can think about the things I've done throughout my life where I did stand alone. And I think that's probably why I feel more and more like I'm a person who is going to have issues if I ever attempt to have a relationship, you know? I don't really know how that would develop now, seeing as how I'm getting old and I'm set in my ways. But that little bitty kid and what he was able to accomplish throughout the years, I have to give him credit for making me the person that I am today. And let's be serious here. We all did stupid things in our youth. We all did. We have to forgive ourselves of that. Remember, one of the first episodes of Alan After Dark, I talked about the biggest lie I ever told. And that's when I said that I had walked in on two of the guys from a different school at a ball game, and I said that they were kissing in the bathroom. And that was just really to gauge how they would react. And boy, did they react. That spread like wildfire throughout the school, and I was asked about it over and over, and everybody was acting like it was the most disgusting thing that anybody could have witnessed. And it was just a lie. I really just hoped that people wouldn't care. And the results of that lie pushed me deeper into the closet out of necessity, out of concern for my own safety. I knew then that you could not be out at all. And I was lucky that I had the one friend, and she became my confidant at that time. And she did keep my secret. Even though, if you think about it, gay guys and gay girls out there, all of us queers, you think that they really did know. People do know, right? They can sense it. They just don't talk about it. I believe I've mentioned sometime in a previous episode that my mother was talking to my brother and told him she thought I was gay, but she didn't tell that to me. And I told you all that incident that happened with that, when she said she had a question for me, and I just looked at her and said, "Don't ask me the question unless you're prepared to hear the truth." And she walked away in tears. And that kind of made our relationship the way it is. You know, on a certain level, it's fine, but there's no depth. There's no connection because I can't really be my true self all the time around them. And that's why I am rarely around them. I talk to them quite frequently on the phone, but I don't see them very often. Only on holidays mostly, and sometimes birthdays. It just depends on what's going on. But that's the way life is too, right? That's the way life goes. We drift apart from people, loved ones, but also in the gay community, we tend to develop our own version of a family, the people that we are closest to, that become as important as any blood relation would. And I guess that's why a lot of us in the gay and queer community view family differently, especially if you have a family that isn't so accepting of you. So we are detached from many people that would be considered our family, at least by DNA, genetics. But we also have the understanding, though, that the definition of family is by far more than just a blood or genetic connection. If you want to look at the true definition of family, it is the people that you confide in and can trust in and can feel safe with and close to and love. And I hope through all these weeks of us talking and chatting about some of the stupidest things we could talk about, some of the dirtiest things we can talk about, and some of the most important things we can talk about, that all of us have a connection, a bond, And I hope that I can stay true to that bond and entertain you and challenge you for many, many, many years to come. Well, there it is, the 100th episode of Alan After Dark. I hope you've had as much fun as I've had reminiscing about the good old days, the good times that we've had so far. I hope you found something inspiring or something at least funny in the last few minutes that we've shared together. I can't wait to share even more with you in the future. And as always, remember, take life by the balls and be real. We'll see you soon.